Hi y'all, I'm Hardie and I welcome you to the first episode of my new Hypertravel with Hardie video series about all the foreign trips I've taken over the last almost 20 years now, starting in 2008. Hypertravel is the same name I used for my previous travel journal called Hypertravel 100 Countries in 2 Years, which I wrote and published in the year 2012, and which will now serve as a template for at least the first few videos of this project, because this will be a little bit different from most vlogs in that they will consist of my previous trips from that hypertravel era, but told mostly from the photographs that I took then and there, and which number in the thousands. I will narrate those trips and regions to the best of my memory as we go, the goal being to inspire you to visit that city or country if you think you might find it interesting. So some of these trips will be organized by the trip and some will be organized by the region. Times for a specific region might be continuous or spread out over several different years, making it something like time travel. But my main interests are geography, language, culture, and music, so that's what I'll concentrate on mostly. I still travel overseas at least once a year, as I have for 50 years, and just recently returned from a 3-week trip that included Japan, Thailand, Bhutan, and Hong Kong. Welcome to my world. These first few videos will concentrate on the first leg of that hyper-travel phase in the year 2008, when I was 54 years old and decided that it was time to get serious about travel. I'd spent most of my life traveling around the world, true, but that was to buy and sell handicrafts from the traditional peoples that I encountered. But at that point, it still totaled only about 50 or so countries. Now it's 155. The first trip was to the southernmost region of South America, which I'd never really visited at that point, though I had worked for years in Bolivia, buying and selling alpaca wool products. And after I have already visited Mexico, Guatemala, Ecuador, and Peru for many years. And it's no accident that these are the Latin American countries with the greatest percentage of indigenous population. So in late 2008, I booked a free flight to Buenos Aires, Argentina, and took it from there, figuring to do a literal round trip to Paraguay, Uruguay, through Patagonia, Argentina, and over to Chile, not that long, narrow country before crossing back to Argentina over land, Bolivia optional, and flying back out before the Christmas rush. So that's what I did, the trickiest part first. That meant scooting up to Paraguay before I got too bogged down in other things. Buenos Aires was okay, but Chile would be more to my American taste, and that would be further down the road. Buenos Aires is for Europeans. Late breakfast meaning coffee and a hot sticky bun if you're lucky, and don't forget the butter. Paraguay was worth it for the novelty, if nothing else. Latinos speaking Guarani just because they like it, I guess. Since most of them aren't really indigenous, though the original Tupis certainly were. The big thrill then was catching a taxi from the Paraguay-Brazil border and going all the way to the Brazil-Argentina border without ever getting out of the car, much less officially entering the country of Brazil. I'd never done that before, or since. I guess it's some kind of free zone, but I'm not sure. The driver even offered to take me to Iguazu Falls for a price, but I politely declined. You can do that on the Argentine side also, and all on public transportation. But the Argentine town on the other border was Puerto Iguazu, which is pretty nice, so I stayed there a few days before finally hoofing it back down to Buenos Aires. It and Montevideo, Uruguay are almost twin cities, so that's an easy hop, or river cruise as the case may be. I liked it too, if for no special reason other than its sentiment and charm. Certainly nothing too exciting unless you're a tango fanatic. I didn't see much of the country either, but that's okay. I did see a percussion festival, but Patagonia was calling me further south as the weather warmed up for the coming South American summer. I didn't make it to Antarctica, unfortunately, but that's not because I didn't want to. Unfortunately, I made the mistake of thinking that Punta Arenas, Chile would be an easy alternative jumping off point to Ushuaia, Argentina, but that is not the case. Actually, more boats probably leave from Buenos Aires, but that's a longer discussion. Suffice it to say that if you want to catch a trip to Antarctica at the last minute, then Ushuaia is probably the better bet, even if it means crossing more borders. Punta Arenas is nice though, even if it's no farther south than Edmonton, Canada is north, so not so exotic, but neither is Ushuaia for that matter. But that's the closest connection to Antarctica if that's your goal. Punta Arenas is something of a dead end also, since from there you either go through the fjords by boat to the north or hop over it all by plane. I lucked out with a cheap flight north to Valdivia and loved it there. I even caught a concert. So very cool. Unfortunately, a puppy dog fell in love with me down by the seal docks, but I couldn't take him with me, so that was sad. But the seals were cool, hanging by the riverside and smelling to high heaven. Santiago, Chile, the capital, was anticlimactic, even though I was staying in a whorehouse, haha. But Valparaiso was better. To some extent, the price of the room heavily dictates the nature of the experience. Viña del Mar would be better on the way back also, but there were the desert cities of La Serena, Antofagasta, and Iquique up ahead on the road to the north, all of which were nice, but not too exciting, unless gypsies excite you, so far from their traditional homes, while looking at acting so much like gypsies too. The smell of curry added to the drama, which I hadn't studied enough Hindi at the time to make any broad predictions. And then there's Calama, celebrated entry to the high desert. It's high and cool, true, but too cool for my school, so I beat a hasty retreat. That's the way to Bolivia or North Argentina also, but I've got to take down south at Viña del Mar, with the film festival soon to start. Viña's okay too. Much cooler than Calama, which is too cool for my school. And Viña's not nearly so pretentious. Or maybe I just don't like to be reminded of my hippie roots. I'd rather be reminded of my film school roots. That doesn't last long though, and soon I'm on the midnight run over the Andes back to Argentina. Mendoza was okay, and the Buenos Aires Chinatown is certainly worth mentioning, but my allocated 6 weeks were almost up. Other events of note were some indigenous dances somewhere in Chile and a music festival in Argentina, but I can't remember the locations exactly, so I'll leave them with a bare mention. Unfortunately, I was just warming up as a still photographer, so the number of photos is a bit scant. Those photos from Peru were later and separate, but served to fill out the feel of southernmost America, especially Peru, where I spent several months, and which is my favorite country in all of South America. This visit was during the pandemic and the sometimes onerous regulations associated with airline travel in that era. Asia was locked down tight for 2 to 3 years, and that's been my main stomping grounds for the last 30 years, after much time in Latin America. So South America was a nostalgia trip and a welcome revisit long after the Hypertravel era. If you like the pictures, then consider the book, available from Amazon. The next installment will visit the Caribbean, including Cuba. Stay tuned. And don't forget to like and subscribe. That helps me a lot, even doesn't cost you a penny. My goal is to put all this on VR, virtual reality, at some point. That's worth the wait, hopefully. That's a different world. Thank you. See you next time.